You need to start recording.
Oh. All right, we'll go ahead and convene the meeting. Land Use Committee meeting of January 25th, 2023. I'm Scott Diener, the chair. We'll do brief introductions.
Jay Rosapepe, City Council.
Fred Chang, and there's no members of the public here.
Okay, just for recording posterity.
Nick Bond, the Director of Community Development for the city.
Jim Fisk, Senior Planner.
Josie Rademacher, Assistant Planner.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Are we cool with the agenda as presented?
Scott, can we just add an update on 902 DeKalb?
Yeah, so agenda item 8 is 902 DeKalb.
And a quick update, unless I've got it wrong, and there's a good possibility. Have we heard any more back on Perry?
You asked that last night. I don't know that we have. Do you know, Nick?
I haven't heard anything. I know that Public Works was working on it, but Jim, perhaps you can send Ian an email and ask him for an update so that we can put it on the next Land Use Committee agenda.
Will do.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Other than adding agenda item number 8, just an update on 902 DeKalb, can we go ahead and dive into item number 1? Are you ready? Fiber requirements?
Yes.
Okay.
So this item is on the agenda because I received a call from a resident of Andazio Village, which is about a 5-year-old subdivision, maybe 7 years old by now, off of Blueberry. And the owner of that home was frustrated because of his lack of options for internet access. And he had contacted KPUD about fiber and said, well, the city has to provide conduit in order for us to serve a particular development. And so in the past, the city has always encouraged developers to put fiber in the ground. In researching the topic, I've heard anecdotally that developers can actually be paid by certain internet providers not to provide KPUD with fiber, and that Paulsbo has adopted a model where they require an additional conduit to be put in for internet competition purposes. And there is an RCW that we put in the packet that essentially provides the authority for this type of rule. And I've reached out to KPUD and actually haven't heard back from the person who is responsible for this yet. I was hoping to have some information for them because I'm not actually sure where KPUD fiber currently runs within the city and whether it's available.
Down Sydney and to the library, runs to the schools, county admin building. It's on the pole in front of my house. My son called on it. No real providers want to it's $3,000 to splice it and put a switch in to start serving. And until you've got enough people that want to be served in a geographic area, and KPUD does surveys from time to time to try to find clusters, because it takes a cluster of people that want their service, and the fiber, of course, has to be there for it to work. And one or two or 5 homes isn't enough.
Right. So with new developments going on in the city, we've always made them aware that they should reach out to KPUD, but I actually don't know whether areas down in the Bethel and Sedgwick area or in McCormick Woods, whether there's even fiber service available for a developer to extend. So that's the information I'm trying to gather to whether it's even worth investigating.
I think
adopting the Paulsbo.
I think Paulsbo's model is good. If the fiber doesn't have to be there, it's just a conduit.
Right.
When we did the undergrounding downtown, we took the initiative to do that. But I think it's a great idea to have this in our code.
I agree. Competition's healthy.
Yeah. It won't happen tomorrow, but I know that the Haven Apartments that we just toured, every unit in there has fiber. So some developers are doing it. So obviously it's on. Well, there's a school that the schools are right up the street. So it's traveling on those poles down that street.
Right. So this is something I think we can investigate further. I did talk to the Paulsbo Public Works employee who has kind of spearheads this effort, and he said that they haven't been real successful with this because there's conduit all over the place, but it isn't connected at this point, and there's no one making an effort to sort of connect these segments of fiber together. And they're looking at revising how this program works. I had told them that, you know, Port Orchard would certainly be interested in what it is that they're doing, and that, you know, all of the cities in the county should probably be on the same page on this. It's probably a significant work effort for us to move forward with this at any real fast pace, but if the city wants us to pursue it, it's something we can absolutely look at adopting.
I don't see this as any different than when people complain because we require frontage improvements and sidewalks to nowhere. You know, the conduit in the ground with caps on the two end of it. And when the neighboring parcel develops, it gets extended farther and farther, and someday, we can create some competition. It isn't going to happen overnight.
All right. Nick, I don't know that this needs to be a standing agenda item, but it should be, we should get updates. Do you know
Well,
how
just
far?
put it in their work plan and bring the code forward, then it's done. I mean, comp plan's going to take precedence over us
Sure.
adding this just to the code, but somewhere
This
in
kind
your
of-
plan, Nick.
Sure. And I told the gentleman who brought this to my attention, I said, we probably should be adopting some goals to support a policy like this as part of our comprehensive planning effort in 2024. And so maybe this is something we do on the implementation side of the comp plan rather than putting other things aside to work on this at this moment.
Okay.
Did he say if he had no internet or he just didn't like the one that he had?
He only had one option and was not happy with the option that he had, either because the speed or reliability wasn't good enough or the service provided wasn't very good.
Did he say what it was? Was it wave cable?
It's Wave. Everybody in our city has access to Wave.
Okay.
We just, matter of fact, there was a commerce deal where we looked into, and we had no areas that weren't served by high-speed internet. I don't like that's the only option I have too, but that's what it is.
Yeah, I think people are just maybe generally unhappy with Wave. We got our bill yesterday and they overcharged us by almost $90. And it seems like every other month we're having to call them and correct what it is.
Right. All right. Well, we will keep this on the radar as part of our comprehensive plan update. And then I want to monitor what Paulsbo is doing, because it sounds like they're actively initiating amendments to their code. And I'd like to kind of follow along with what their process and their thinking is with their amendments.
I know of a couple people that have gone away from even the cable, that there are cellular options, while they aren't as fast and robust, there are alternatives out there than a wire.
Yeah, and we do have some new cell towers coming into the city that should hopefully improve that.
Mm-hmm.
Starlink. All right. Are we done with that? Okay, the second item is fireworks. I know that we're awaiting the results of the survey, but I also have heard from others that maybe we want to set this aside for a bit.
I think it'd be prudent. I mean, I'm passionate about this issue, but I recognize there aren't the votes there. And then,
Okay.
we have an election in November, and depending on what the position of the new council member is on this issue, I believe it was 4-3, wasn't it? Or was it 5-2? What was the vote?
It was 5-2.
5-2. Yeah. So I'm not even sure one vote's going to change the position, but
Yeah, I also feel like the discussion was kind of short-circuited a bit. Well, maybe that's not the right description, but I think people didn't lean into the trend of the survey enough. And also we didn't really discuss the comments that we got and characterize those as mostly retailers, either wholesalers or individual retailers, versus the other side of the fence on this. So I'm content to hold off on this. Jay?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have the discussion after the July 4th activity. At least gathering information. I think it's, we've always kind of done it in the off season, so to speak. And that's when we do hear from the realtors and all the nonprofits looking to raise funds. So I would say let's put this on the parking lot and then gather our information around the July 4th holiday.
Okay. We did get a good comment last year that the best time to take that survey is right after July 4th, when
Yep.
people have gone through their experiences. Okay. Anything else on that? Fred, anybody?
I would say, I agree with what you guys are saying, and I would just like to lower the tenor of the discussion, but have a more lengthy discussion. It did seem a little impassioned last time, and I was one of the 5, but I'm definitely willing to discuss it. And I thought we just needed a little more time to ask questions and figure things out. But I think it's a good idea to put it off at least until July.
Okay.
So Nick, do you want to flag us creating a survey? Maybe Josie can work with Josh and tee up a survey and have it ready to go. So after 4th of July, and otherwise we'll talk about it after 4th of July, which will be late July, and then we'll work for 2 months on creating a survey, and all of a sudden it's Christmas and we've got a survey out on the street. So maybe
Would it be worthwhile to suggest that a survey is going to come out in people's utility statements?
yeah, it's probably not going to come out in their utility statement. That's in some place where we're going to, social media is.
No, just to advise that one is coming.
The
On
problem
utilities.
with that is, our utility customers are, what is it, a third of the city is West Sound and another 10% is Bremerton.
Right.
So
Okay.
not everybody gets it when it's in the utility mailer. We
Okay.
already had the last survey. Was there a problem with the questions that were asked, or do we want to ask those again and look at how the trend has changed, if at all, or if we get a better response because it's right after the 4th of July?
I think that's, and many people just use automatic services. They don't even look at that piece of paper.
Right.
And let alone next point that a third of our customers don't even get their water or sewer from us.
I'm happy to revisit the survey itself if we want to make sure that the right questions have been asked. I felt like it was a pretty good survey at the time.
The other thing too is several cities since last year, a couple other cities have banned fireworks too. So that kind of gives a little bit more impetus.
I don't know of anybody in Kitsap County.
Not in Kitsap, and other
Cambridge
ones.
has had a ban.
I'm sorry?
Cambridge has had a ban for.
No, there's some on the east side that have banned them.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just saying is, so we can gather more information. I think the last survey was pretty decent. I think it's just the timeliness of it and then revisiting the information and results.
All right. So we're going to kick this can down the road, but be ready to act, or I guess act right after July 4th. Okay.
Yeah, I've added it back to my long range project list, and we'll revisit that this summer.
Okay. All right. Anything else on fireworks? Okay. County urban growth area modifications.
Yeah, for this one, I'm going to share my screen. Although Josie, you're going to have to give me permission to share.
She controls everything.
Yes. So in your packet, there were 3 maps showing the proposed amendments that we received from Kitsap County. The county has received actually 4 proposals in 3 different areas immediately adjacent to Port Orchard, which could become part of our urban growth area if the county were to move forward with with amending its urban growth area boundary. And so Eric Baker reached out to me and asked me to, what I thought of the proposals, whether these seemed reasonable. And we're going to have to write a letter probably in late February commenting on these possible changes. I brought this up at a city council meeting. I think the first meeting in January, I mentioned this in my director's reports, and just wanted to have a little bit more discussion on this in advance of establishing the city's position to the county. The First Amendment is just north of the McCormick North subdivisions, near McCormick Village Park. There's this triangular shaped piece of property that is on the east side of a creek feature and has, I think, about 6 acres of high ground that's very easily developable. What's labeled here as Campus Parkway is now called McCormick Village Drive and provides access to a subdivision that's actually in Bremerton called the Bayside or Bayview plat. I'm trying to remember the correct name of it, but
I think it's
regardless,
Sinclair
there's about,
Ridge.
what's that?
I think it's Sinclair Ridge.
That's right, Sinclair Ridge. So there's about 300 more homes that are going to be built just to the east of this site. And there's, 300 or 400 homes just south of this in Port Orchard. And with this creek kind of creating a natural buffer, this property in particular seems well suited for urban development because there's sewer there, there's roads, there's sidewalks, there's parks. It's close to our planned commercial village. And so I think the city would absolutely support the addition of this property into the urban growth area. I just, if there's any discussion on this one, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next.
So Nick, for everybody's awareness, I need to recuse myself from this discussion. I don't know what the rules are for recusal in a committee setting versus, for example, a council setting.
There's
But
no
because of-
action from here. So
We don't-
it's information.
Yeah, we're not
Okay.
voting.
Well,
Nick,
nonetheless, I'll be silent on this.
That's
because
good.
of
That'd be
my-
good.
Sure, I understand.
Okay,
Nick is north up in this map.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. 'Cause-
And north is Bremerton. You can see the red line here is the northern boundary of Port Orchard. And actually, these houses in the upper right corner of the map are in Bremerton as well as
Okay,
the Sinclair
okay, I
Ridge.
got it. Okay, I see now. Yeah, I thought it was, yeah, okay.
This is the
Okay.
fire
I
district
needed-
site, right?
Okay, I see where Old Clifton is. Okay, I get it now.
No, I don't know if the fire station or if the fire district has submitted an application, but they're doing something further to the west, possibly.
Okay.
The next 2 properties are near the Ruby Creek area. You can see the Albertson store here in the pink and gray area. One parcel is immediately south of the Ruby Creek Center, and then the Yamamoto property. Dick Brown and Mr. Yamamoto have been talking about bringing this into the city for years. Blackjack Creek obviously runs just east of their properties. There's some wetlands in here. So this is a little bit more difficult because of the critical areas, but its proximity to our planned center potentially makes this suitable for urban development. We also do have sewer capacity. Well, we will have sewer capacity in the Albertsons lift station once the new lift station is built just further up the road at the Kitsap Transit site. So I'm more neutral on this one, but I'm certainly open to it because I think this probably is more suitable for development than some of the other areas that are currently in the UGA if they were going to reduce something and add something somewhere else. Yeah, Jake.
Yep. On the land that's west, I know we had several discussions before. A lot of that is wetlands, isn't it? I mean, it's not really developed. What's the development that's there is pretty much been had, hasn't it?
Well, I think the property west of Sydney is actually not, I mean, there's some wetlands kind of out in this area that may encroach on that property, but certainly the area up by the road is dry.
The
Then there's
proposal,
also-
though, to bring this in on that's not the proposal. It's the property on the east side of the road.
It's both.
is
Property
it
number
both?
1 and property 60 are both proposed for
Okay.
inclusion.
All right.
Would they be commercial or residential?
So the property west of Sydney would become residential, I think, with a density of 10 acres, 10 units per acre. Currently, the proposal for the Yamamoto property is light industrial. I think we would prefer that not to be industrial, and the only industrial use there that I can imagine that somebody wants to do is possibly storage units with all the development. And I don't think we want to see, if we're going to bring something in, we certainly don't want it to be developed as storage units. I would prefer a residential or a commercial designation there.
Mixed use.
Yeah, probably commercial mixed use would be more appropriate if it were to come in.
Agreed.
All right, the final property is out Phillips Road. And if you'll remember, in 2016, the county trimmed the UGA. There were a ton of properties out here that were in our UGA, and they reduced the size of the UGA. The owner of this property, there are 4 parcels just west of Phillips Road, and he is requesting to come back into the city or into the urban growth area. And so that would be a residential 1 dwelling unit per 10 acre, or I'm sorry, that would be a 5 to 9 dwelling units per acre proposed density, so low density residential. Again, I'm neutral on this one. There is sewer running down Phillips Road that's available for this property, and there are other areas of our urban growth area that don't have sewer available. And so as long as there's no net change to our UGA in terms of a reduction in UGA size, I think we're probably open on this one, but let me know if you feel otherwise.
Just real quickly, is this in addition to the areas that we propose taking? Or is this just completely different from what we've had discussions as a council before?
I think that's a different subject matter. These are adding to the UGA. The discussions we were having previously were about annexing UGA.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
That
it has to be
clarifies.
in the UGA in order to be annexed.
Okay, sorry, guys. Thank you for
No
the
problem.
clarification.
So I think if we were to write a letter right now, it would be supportive of the area at McCormick. Kind of tentatively supportive of the proposal that's on the screen now, and probably as long as there's no net loss to our UGA, we would support Yamamoto, but without the industrial designation. So
Mhm.
these two could come in, but I think that with the critical areas that are here, the county probably needs to look closely at the development potential of that property and really figure out whether this is viable or not. So we'll be drafting a letter in February to comment on this as soon as we're prompted by the county. All right.
So tentative support on the Phillips Road as well.
I think so. I mean, it really depends on whether there's reductions proposed to offset this. My understanding from Eric is that they're going to be releasing the alternatives that get considered. And that's what we're commenting on. And so until we see the alternatives and whether this is a net increase in UGA or whether it's neutral or whether it's a net reduction in UGA, could change the letter pretty dramatically.
Okay. Any other discussion on the proposed UGA modifications?
No, I'm good.
All right. Housing action plan.
Jim, are you going to speak to this one, or I think?
Yeah, this was really just an opportunity after the presentation on the 10th to get any additional comments that you might have. We're going to summarize the presentation that council received at the February Planning Commission meeting. We just kind of wanted to get some additional feedback if you feel it's necessary.
Well, one of the things go ahead, Jay.
Oh, no, I could wait, there's a lot of statistics in here. And so there's a lot of, I don't mean to say assumptions, but I'm hoping that, these are all the latest statistics as much as they can gather. I was really surprised by the impact fees. And it was like, okay, or are these correct? For some reason, it just seemed kind of low in some of the other folks, but you know, when I was researching it online, it looked like they were all there. So my only comment was, you know, just, you know, the latest information as possible before this is finalized. My only comment.
Yeah, and remember, this is an initial conditions report, so it's really informing the plan that is now being written. We did point out to the consultant that they had the numbers for Paulsbo's traffic impact fees wrong. Paulsbo's, they were providing a per trip impact fee as opposed to a per unit impact fee. So Paulsbo's impact fee is actually right in line with Port Orchard's. So we're pretty close, I think, to Paulsbo in terms of our overall cost of development.
So my impression was that they were going to come back with sort of a prioritized matrix of suggested improvements, code changes, et cetera. I was curious what staff thought about that. One of the things that stood out was code complexity. And then I thought, thinking back on this, weren't they a part of code development at the time? But I'm kind of curious what staff thought about some of the key takeaways.
Well, so the code complexity that they're commenting on, I think when we adopted design standards in 2016 or 2017 that they were part of developing. Then when we revamped the zoning code in 2019, they were not a part of that. And so they're
Okay.
pointing out some of the complexities with the new code.
I see.
I think the real wild card right now is that the state legislature has like 6 or 7 zoning bills that are proposing to preempt local control. And so the state
Mhm.
legislature may make the changes for us, regardless of what our housing action plan recommends. The other thing that's in play right now is that as part of the 2024 comprehensive plan update, we are required to plan for housing for all economic segments of our population. And that's
Yeah.
a very different approach to previous comprehensive plan updates. And we're just now just today, we received the guidance from Commerce on the approach that we have to take to verifying that we allow housing types to support people at all income levels. And not only that we allow the housing types, that when they're being built, they're actually available at levels that are affordable to different segments of the population. So there's so much up in the air between the Commerce guidance that's been released and what the legislature may or may not do, combined with the recommendation from the Housing Action Plan, that I believe we're going to have a significant amount of work to do on our zoning code under any scenario, and it's just really not clear yet. So I think we'll take the Housing Action Plan recommendations combined with whatever the legislature does and what our obligations are under the comp plan.
So Nick, how do let's say we modify our code to allow for a more missing middle stuff, you know, and I think we have done that to a certain extent, but how can we can't force the private sector to build subsidized housing. You know, how do you implement this without government subsidy, particularly from the state and federal government? It doesn't work. The private sector doesn't build subsidized housing. They just don't, unless we do things like what we did last night. You know, that's a form of a subsidy.
Right. And so we may have to look at our incentives to try to make, you know, we talked about changing our MFTE program to better incentivize affordable units and making sure that those units are at a price that's lower than currently available. So that's one thing that we can do, but you're right, it's a subsidy that it's a direct action we would have to take to subsidize housing. The other thing that is probably going to be part of a menu that comes out of this plan is to say, look, you know, some cities have to look at inclusionary zoning. And as part of an inclusionary zoning program, they offer a fee in lieu of construction where the developer, in order to not provide affordable housing, has to pay a fee that then goes into a fund that supports the development of affordable housing, which is essentially shifting the burden, the cost burden from people who can afford homes to people who can't afford homes. And it's another subsidy. So it'll actually raise housing prices on people with higher incomes as a way to provide affordable housing. And that's such a complex thing to implement. We don't have the resources to run a program like that. So I'm the Department of Commerce right now has asked for public comment on the proposed guidance that will be issued for our 2024 comp plan update. And so we're just now reading that document for the first time today and are going to likely have to comment to the state to say, this is what you're proposing here is not workable. But yeah, the best I can say right now is I don't know.
I testified today at the Senate Housing Committee, and there's a lot of people drinking the Kool-Aid. I was in the minority testifying against the mandates. And Gig Harbor was there, a couple of other cities, but the larger cities want everybody else doing this.
Doing what?
State's gonna control our zoning.
One size fits all.
Yep.
Yeah, open up your zones.
Yeah, and I guess if that were to pass the legislature, my hope is that we don't have to spend a year and a half doing what the Department of Commerce guidance says, because the state has already mandated that we have to provide all of this housing. And so why do we need to do a ton of study and zoning changes based on the results of that study?
Right now, Gig Harbor is dealing with, they couldn't get their comprehensive plan approved the last cycle because they're exceeding their population thresholds. So they lost out on federal funding opportunities. And so they were testing
For us.
So there, now this tool will allow a fourplex on every single family lot. It'll pour gasoline on the single family housing market, and Gig Harbor's going, we're already being sanctioned. You can't do this to us.
All
One
right,
thing
I
was-
guess. Go ahead, Fred.
One thing I was intrigued by was the consultants were throwing out the term SRO, and I think that's good because I hadn't heard a lot about it. I don't know if we have very much of any of it in town, and I'm not sure how we encourage it, but it seemed like it would be a housing need that isn't really being addressed.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to look at the recommendations of the Housing Action Plan combined with the whatever mandates are handed down, and we'll go from there.
All right. So we've changed from a two-pronged planning approach with jobs and population allocation to three-pronged now, essentially. Anything else? Okay. Development agreement and sign regulations.
Jim, were you taking this or should I? I'll do it. So the Home Depot project, we have been talking to them about their store on Bethel that they're proposing, that they had permitted a decade ago and are now resurrecting. One of the things that was apparent in their pre-application meeting with the city is that that site and the signage needs of a site that's going to have multiple commercial pads with internal private roads providing circulation. Our sign code is not workable based on the signage needs for that sort of situation. Our sign code currently refers to a master sign program as being an option where you can kind of reallocate your signage and get more flexibility, but it doesn't allow you to increase net signage based on the amount of buildings that you have and the fact that some of those buildings are fronting these internal kind of private roads. So what we're proposing to do, there's not a lot of process in the sign code for how to go about approving a master sign program. And we want to amend the development agreement chapter so that where we have these really big or complex sites, we have the ability to approve a signage program as part of a development agreement to provide that flexibility as part of the incentives for getting other public improvements that are needed. And currently the sign chapter is one of the few chapters in Title 20 that isn't something that can be amended by development agreement. So it's a relatively simple ordinance to add the sign chapter to the list of chapters that can be amended by development agreement, in where the standards can be amended by development agreement. But it has a big impact in terms of our ability to negotiate with Home Depot and try to get the best possible outcome for the city.
Can I ask why Home Depot is approaching this with a DA?
So one of the things we're seeking from Home Depot is for them to build Bethel in front of their store, the Phase 4 Bethel project.
Okay.
So we have to do a traffic impact fee credit agreement. We're also, they're seeking Corps of Engineers approval for they've got some category 3 and 4 wetlands that have to be filled and mitigated. But we're already going to be doing a development agreement for the impact fees. And as part of this process, if we run into design standard issues or signage issues, we're probably already going to have to talk about some of the architectural standards, because the size of these stores really isn't well accommodated in our design standards. And it's clear that they're seeking more signage than what's allowed. And I don't think what they're seeking is unreasonable relative to the amount of pads they're going to have within that site. So they're only developing their store now, but there's going to be future commercial pads along Bethel that wouldn't have any signage left that's available to them based on how we allocate sign area.
All right,
I
thank
think
you.
this would have come in handy too with the South Kitsap Mall. They did eventually get their sign program approved, but it was really complex, and a lot of the things that they wanted to do, they couldn't do because they had a cap on sign area. And so if at some point they're adding additional storefronts within the parking lot along Mile Hill, this is something that we may need in terms of being able to permit adequate signage for the businesses that are there.
Okay. Can we do a quick detour? Since we brought up South Kitsap Mall, the guns and ammo store, once the sign goes up above the guns and ammo store, are we going to ask that those feather signs come down?
I'm not even familiar with the guns and ammo store. So is that in the mall?
Yeah, it's between a restaurant there and the New to You, which is next to Ace Hardware. And if you go by there now, there's at least 4 feather signs advertising guns and ammo.
I will bring it to our code enforcement officer's attention, and we'll look at it with our Jim. I think we just approved a sign program there, right?
We did. The master sign plan is approved, but there
Yeah.
wouldn't be any feather signs in that plan.
I'm not advocating that we do anything but until a sign goes up above their store, and then we want to just watch it.
I don't think they're permitted anyway, so.
Right, okay. I mean, it seems reasonable to allow something temporary while they're waiting for their sign to go on the building, but thank you.
Do you know if the store is actually facing the parking lot, or whether it's internal
Yeah.
to the mall?
It's facing,
Okay.
Yep.
All right, we'll look into
Okay.
it.
all right. 2023 comp plan amendments.
All right, we have a code enforcement case that's been ongoing for a while now on Me Line Road. And I don't know if all of you, I certainly, Fred, you were there last time we talked about Me Line Road, but a number of years ago, the city initiated an amendment to the comp plan because Me Line Road, which is behind the Lowe's store and which is only accessible via a rural road, is zoned commercial mixed use. It doesn't have sewer. It's water lines. If it has water, it's substandard. I think everything's on well though out there. And there's no direct access via an urban level street to any of that. So it's very hard to develop. All of the homes that are out there are currently non-conforming and can't be enlarged or expanded. They can be maintained as in their current use, but we have now one of those houses has a code enforcement problem because they modified the house without permits, and they can't get permits to make the improvements legal because it doesn't conform to zoning codes. Other property owners have realized that they can't make improvements, and they've contacted the city, and all of them, or several of them, came out in opposition to the city's proposed change years ago. Now they realize that we were in fact trying to help them, and now they would like us to reconsider that amendment and take that area to R1 zoning and residential comp plan designation. I had hoped to save this for our big 2024 comp plan amendment update, but due to this code enforcement case, I met with a group of people who live on the street and said that I would be willing to sponsor this as the director per our comp plan amendment code and take this through in 2023 so that we can get this code enforcement case resolved. So right now, we accept comp plan amendment applications until the end of this month. Once we hit February 1st, we will be preparing the docket to go to council on the 14th of February to adopt a comprehensive plan docket for 2023 that includes just this one set of amendments for to the map. And then we'll take things through the planning commission process and hopefully have an ordinance to the council later this spring. And so obviously, before we have the meeting on the 14th of February, I wanted to make sure that council was, or that the land use committee was supportive of bringing this amendment forward.
How many homes impacted?
I think it's probably 13 properties and 8 homes. I'll pull it up on the map here. Let's find the share button. So this is Meeline Road. You can see the Lowe's Home Improvement Store. Highway 16 is on the right of the page. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like 7 homes here. Maybe I think there might be an 8th home in this triangle. The city boundary is essentially at the southern end of the properties that front on Meeline Road. To get there, you've got to drive on Dogwood Road southeast all the way down to Sydney here, which is in the rural part of the county. So it doesn't make sense for commercial development to occur here because you have to drive a quarter mile or a half mile on a rural road to get there. And bringing, you could potentially build a bridge across Blackjack Creek or these wetlands to get back here, but that's, millions of dollars and not likely to be viable. Likewise, getting sewer in here is going to be pretty impossible. So the proposal is low density residential, which would make all of these homes legally conforming, and then people can improve their homes and maintain their homes as is, and it will likely remain residential from here on out.
Any concerns, anybody?
Is there a downside? I'm not hearing one.
In terms of our comprehensive plan, it shifts the balance of our commercial and residential land slightly, but I don't think it's going to cause too many problems in terms of our employment and population targets. I think we have pretty low assumptions for this area as is because there's no utilities there.
And the Yamamoto property would tip it back the other direction because that would be commercial next door to it.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, next meeting, March meeting date?
Yes, that the date of our next regular meeting, I will not be here. I will not be in town that day. So I wanted to see if we wanted to cancel and wait till March or reschedule the February to a different week. We've already delayed this meeting by 1 week, so maybe the 4th Wednesday of the month would work for everyone at 4:30.
Do you have action items for us or agenda items for us if we meet?
Well, we might have the Perry Avenue parking situation by then. Nothing specific at this time, but it's
Okay.
possible.
I'm good with whatever day we want to shift this to.
It would be February 22nd if we pushed it out 1 week.
I'm
That
okay.
sounds okay.
22nd or 20, what'd you say, 22nd?
22nd, yes.
Good placeholder.
Okay,
And
All
Scott,
right.
you want- Item 8.
yeah, item 8 is the 902 DeKalb update. Fred, did you want to lead that with anything?
Yeah, and this is just a question. I got an email from, I guess, the applicant or owner of 902 DeKalb. I don't know what the issue is, but it seems to be something about having to do with permitting and
Where is that, Fred?
That's
It's
the
on Harrison and DeKalb, the church.
old church.
Next,
Oh, the
next to
church.
Central Park.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've talked to Andrew, whether we're on a good path right now. They're waiting, they didn't understand that, Nick, and you can jump in anytime here. They didn't understand that when they bought this and came to us, that our code wouldn't have allowed their proposed changes. And we've had to change our code to allow this use, so that they could apply actually for a conditional use permit. And so they've just in the last 2 weeks applied for their conditional use permit, and I think we're getting close to being done with that review, and it'll be heading to the hearing examiner in the next probably month or two.
Probably not, yeah, maybe 2 months. The application only came in 2 weeks ago for a conditional use permit. But you're right, Carrie, right before Carrie left the city, we had adopted an ordinance that created a definition for congregate living facilities, and I believe they've applied for a conditional use permit to permit this as a congregate living facility. So I think there was just a disconnect when we changed the code. I don't think they realized that it was that they had to apply for a conditional use permit, which goes to the hearing examiner, as being able to just submit, as opposed to being able to submit a building permit to do this outright without any further land use review.
And I've spoken to Andrew Kane, one of the owners, just in the past week.
Okay, no, I wasn't sure what his request was, but it did sound like they were frustrated with the process. And yes, he did mention that he spoke to you, Rob, and it sounds like they are resolved at the present time.
I think that email, Fred, was dated the 12th of January.
Yeah, and I got a response back on the 19th. Yeah, so.
I mean, they're
Okay.
frustrated that this process is taking so long, but our code didn't allow what they wanted to do. And we've been over backwards to get them to a place where they can apply for a conditional use permit.
I
What's-
did
what
wonder
is-
what took them so long to apply for that, because I think earlier on, that was my understanding, is they could get through a CUP. And I just wasn't sure why they weren't applying for it.
I thought we had taken the council had taken a vote on this last year. We had a discussion on it. I thought,
Code changes.
yeah,
make-
code
yeah,
changes,
to allow
allowing
it.
them to move forward.
So, right, to get them to where they could apply. So
Right.
they haven't had the opportunity to apply until, what, the end of the year? -ish?
Oh, it's been a while. I mean, Carrie left a year and a half ago. So,
Okay,
Jim, you got,
Yeah, I actually received the Amici House application initially. So that was 2020. And so Carrie and I kind of worked on this together. And at the time of their application, they would have had to rezone the property, a site-specific rezone, and do a conditional use permit to do this. So we came up with a definition. I want to say it was late 2020 or 2021, I'm sorry, when the council approved this new definition.
Mhm.
And since then, it's just kind of sat there. And then a few months ago, they submitted a TI. I thought we were pretty clear, Carrie and I were pretty clear with the applicant about what they needed to do with the conditional use permit. They didn't submit that. And so during one of our weekly coordination meetings, this kind of bubbled up. So they've been notified what they need to do. And so it should be on the right path.
so they're just not happy there was a disconnect.
yeah, TI stands for tenant improvement, just for
What's the use that they're applying for again?
congregate living facility, I
Okay.
believe is
Good.
what.
Yeah, I think it's a youth group home.
Long-term
Not
housing.
group home is a different definition altogether. We adopted the definition of congregate living facilities specifically to
Call it
facilitate.
what you want, I'll call it what I want.
Potato, potato.
And we wonder why there's miscommunication.
It sounds like the closest thing we have to this SRO that I've been hearing about, actually. Single room occupancy.
Yeah, I mean, we allow boarding houses in some zones, which is similar to a single use occupancy. Or single room occupancy, sorry. It's I'm just looking at the zoning table right now. a lodging house, it's called, and we allow that by conditional use in the R3, R4, and R5 zones. And a boarding house is allowed in R4 and R5.
And
So
this area is R1 or R2, right? I think it's R2.
Yeah, it's R2.
R2, okay. That was one of the rubs, is that they weren't, okay, yeah, they weren't in the right zone for that, okay. Okay, well, thank you for the update. I just was sort of puzzled by the whole thing.
All right. Anything else? Good of the order?
Have a great day.
All right. We'll
Have a good
adjourn
evening.
at 5:24. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.